Finally, no single company sets the price of oil or gasoline. The market establishes the price based on available supply and the demand for that supply. Continued investments in new production is the only way to achieve balanced markets and more affordable prices that bring real relief at the pump.
That was ExxonMobil Chairman and CEO Darren Woods speaking before House lawmakers yesterday on gas prices. Executives from 6 major oil firms testified for nearly 3 hours on the Hill. Their firms are defending against allegations their firms are holding back production to keep prices high and pad their profits. Let's bring in a lawmaker who was part of that hearing. We've got Congresswoman Kathleen Rice of New York joining us today. Congresswoman, it's good to talk to you. I'm thinking in the lead up to this hearing, we heard from so many Democratic lawmakers who said the fact that oil and gas prices have not tracked together is proof that price gouging is happening. And yet we heard from every executive yesterday who said it's the market that dictates the price, not necessarily big oil. Do you buy that?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. And I'm so glad that we were able to speak to these oil executives. Every time that we have hearings like this, I try to assume the position of a everyday consumer who's right now seeing higher gas prices and higher energy bills. What they heard yesterday were a bunch of oil and gas executives admitting that they have had greater annual compensation than in years past. Their companies are seeing even bigger profits than they were before the pandemic. And while it is true that oil is a global commodity and the rates of purchase for oil are set by global OPEC, et cetera. The fact is that the price of crude oil has gone down, and yet the price of gas that we are seeing as consumers at the pump when we go to fill up our gas tanks are staying very, very high. And so, yes, I think that can be one indicator that these oil and gas executives can actually do more to bring the price of gas down. But they are also worried about their shareholders who are saying, no, we want the prices to stay up because that means more money for us. So I think it was really, I'm glad that they all admitted that they're making more money personally as CEOs and that their companies are making more money. But if a democracy is going to work, it has to work for everyone, not just big oil. We have to work together and find practical collaborative solutions, not just temporary Band-Aids. And that's what we were hoping to accomplish yesterday in a bipartisan way.
The question is away from oil companies. What's the policy in D.C. that can help drive some of those prices down? And we've heard a number of proposals within your party, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi talking about a use it or lose it approach. Essentially, companies that don't use their federal drilling permits won't necessarily have that anymore. You've got Senator Sheldon Whitehouse talking about a windfall tax, taxing the profits of oil companies, on $66 a barrel or higher, so that can be passed on to consumers. I mean, what is the policy that you think would likely be the most effective in bringing gas prices down?
I don't think there's only one thing. I think it's going to be a combination of things. And I will say that I believe that the Biden administration has been doing everything that they can do, whether it's by issuing more leases for more domestic drilling and production to go on, whether it's releasing 1 million barrels a day from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. I agree with all of those things because those are in the short term going to help us eventually come up with a long-term solution. But what I think is really important for people to focus on, and I think the everyday consumer is seeing this now, is that this is an issue, gas prices. It's not just an economic issue here at home. It is a national security issue as well. We have got to stop relying on Russia and other, not good actors for our energy needs. And what I was happy to see yesterday is that a lot of these CEOs understand the future of energy is going in a greener direction. So whether it's investments in offshore wind or solar, some of them have agreed to be carbon neutral by, I believe one company said by 2050. I mean, they understand that this is not just an economic issue, but it is an issue of national security. We cannot be in a position where other countries, not our allies, are deciding what the availability of oil is going to be. We have to wean off our reliability on oil and take our energy production in this country in a greener direction. And I was glad to hear these CEOs doing that. But, when you come up with, say, a gas tax holiday, I personally don't support that, because what I would love consumers to understand about that is, yeah, it might save you a couple of dollars in the short term. The long-term problem with that is that you're not going to see roads being fixed or bridges being fixed. So you're going to have you're going to hit a pothole and you're going to have to pay for a new tire. So we have to make sure that keep investing in the infrastructure of this country, because that affects everyday consumers too, as well as the price of gas.
Representative Brian Chung here. I want to ask about the interactions you've had with constituents, because we've heard that the Biden administration has said, look, the Russia-Ukraine situation could make the situation worse. We know that the amount of Russian oil that we were importing isn't necessarily as intense as some of these European countries, but it seems like a lot of Americans aren't satisfied with that as a response. So with the midterms coming up later this year, I mean, how pressing is all of this to a person in your district?
Well, I think that these are the bread and butter issues that we know drive voters to the polls. We are about to vote on a bill that's coming from the Senate that's going to ban imports of Russian oil. And I think that's a really good first step. But again, we have to figure out how we can meet consumers where they are. And right now, where they are is paying far too much when they go to the grocery store, far too much to fill up their gas tank. And, as Democrats, obviously it's, which I am. And by the way, I'm not running for reelection, so maybe I can be a little more, objective about these issues. But I do worry about these bread and butter issues that constituents, certainly not just in my district, but all across the country, are facing. Yep. And I don't blame them when they look to Washington for answers, because so many of these issues that they're facing, we can address. And so, look, I know that my colleagues are going to be out there explaining what the Biden administration and Democrats just kind of across the board are supporting. And these are issues that are going to hopefully get inflation under control. Now, remember, we're coming out of a pandemic. So, it's going to take some time.
Representative Kathleen Rice, we've run out of time, but again, Democrat from New York, thanks again for taking the time to stop by our show. We really appreciate it.